Welcome back, everybody, to the Derby City Fandom podcast. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Long time no see.
Long time no see.
Everybody doing okay?
Yeah, we're doing good, man. I'm sure Jake is doing fine as well. He's too absorbed in his phone.
I'm doing well.
Typical.
It's good to see y'all. Good to be here.
Yes.
Kenny, what's on the agenda for this evening?
So, today we are going to be talking about our full thoughts, some lore tidbits, some fun facts, and maybe some weird elven pronunciations. We are talking about Season 2, Rings of Power.
Boo!
Oh,
Boo!
Colin's not a fan.
I actually enjoyed it.
Oh.
Hey, no, turn me back up.
Says the man that's peeking my mics. Anyways, it was good. I won't say it's great. We can argue, and we'll follow my statements up with the ratings for the season in particular. But I will say that I did not like this season quite as much as the first one, but I don't think it was terrible.
Where'd they go wrong?
The pacing was different. Some of the more bombastic set pieces for the season weren't on the same grandiose scale.
I don't get it. With that amount of money, I don't understand how you screw anything up.
Well, it comes down to pacing, I think, in this particular season. The pacing is off in a couple of sections. Anyways, Colin, your favorite section. How did this rate?
Actually, I'm going to need you to pull it up on the computer because I didn't actually get it.
Fair enough. Okay. This is why I'm the one behind the keyboard.
So, wow, IMDb has a 6.9 out of 10.
Too low, too high, too low, too high.
It's honestly only rated a couple points lower than the first season. The first season averaged around 7.
You know, I'd probably get it a 6 point, maybe a 6.6.
Fair enough.
Maybe a 6. If I'm feeling generous, 6.8.
What makes you say that? Why? Don't say pacing. You can say pacing.
No, that is a very huge concern for me. The way the pacing was, there's in the show this season, there was one main plot line, but all these side plots that were also important, but not really. So the pacing just didn't.
Yeah.
Some of these side plots are yeah, that's cool and all, and I do want to know that, but at the same time, let's focus more on this particular plot, and then we can get back to that. But there are literally so many things going on all at the same time and transitioning. We're dealing with the hobbits for a few minutes, and then we jump over to Numenor, then we're going over to Southlands, then we're going to freaking Eregion, and then we're back with the hobbits, and then we're freaking dealing with a bunch of other shit, and it's just oh my god, this is 70 minutes of this? 70 fucking minutes of this shit?
He didn't even mention the dwarves.
Or the fucking dwarves. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. I can't even remember what the fuck is going on because there's so many things that were happening. It was just so freaking jumbled together. And it's just, I'm invested in some of the characters, but, other characters not so much. I want to jump into this show and actually care for the universe, care for the characters, care for the plots.
Yeah.
But this season, I couldn't give a fuck less. Yeah, there are cool things that happen in the series. We can...
Word.
Sorry, give me a swear jar, whatever. I don't care. But there are cool things that happen in the series, don't get me wrong, but, so what?
Yeah, I do agree with Colin. There are definitely certain plot threads in the second season that the show is trying to make you focus more on than the others. The ones that they really want you to focus on are, the creation of the different rings, the namesake of the season or the show. Then you got the dwarves kind of dealing with the aftermath of their rings being created, and then you have the stuff going on in Numenor. The problem is that you also they also decided to tie in a backstory to Gandalf with the Harfoots, basically your hobbits, but your earlier variety of hobbits.
Yeah.
Before they actively decide to settle down in a spot. So we had to deal with their plot line and how they develop within the story, and it's clear that they have less screen time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If friends told me that the plot was an issue for the second season, and they kept telling me it's just way too convoluted. There's just too much.
That's probably the best word for it. Yeah. It does come off as convoluted.
But I did have one question for you all.
Sure.
What was your thoughts in terms of lore? The other criticism I heard was it was deviating too much from what Tolkien intended. Did you agree with that?
I'll let Colin go first here.
Okay. So there are aspects of the show that are in the book, right? So the whole Sauron Anatar, that is in the book for sure.
Yes.
He has many names. He keeps saying that. That's true for sure. But the way that the rings were factually made, they didn't do that in order in the series. Because the way that the season 1 ended was the elven rings were made. They were made last, actually.
Yes.
So it starts out with the rings for the dwarves, 7 of them, and then the 9 rings were made, and then the elven ring, and then the 1 ring that Sauron has. Those were both made in secret. They were made pretty much within a short time frame of each other last.
Yes.
But obviously, yes, Sauron did not have any hands-on or any way of corrupting the rings that the elves made, for sure. But he did partake in the making of the rings for the dwarves and as well as for the rings for men.
He definitely had more influence in his creation of the 9 than he did of the 7. And we see that later on. It's just okay, the fantastic line of true creation requires sacrifice.
Yeah.
So he takes that quite literally and uses his black blood as a substitute for mithril, effectively.
Yeah. So mithril was definitely a factor for making the rings, and as well as what you just said, for sure. But what I kind of have an issue with as well, one of the issues, the writers, they have the tools to, meet with a representative of Tolkien or
with the estate.
Right, essentially, and take lore from that and insert it into the show, but they also have the freedom to do what they think they should do with the story as well. So
sure, they are loosely covering bits in the story that would have happened but were never actually written down by Tolkien.
Right.
So then all of that has to be up to interpretation.
Right. And so that's where I kind of, yes, I agree you should be able to do that, but at the same time, I'm in it for the lore and I want to see that on screen. I want to see that shit live action.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, okay. If it's good, if it's creative writing and you go about it the right way and do a great job, then absolutely throw your own little spin in there for sure.
Yeah.
But the way they did it this season just kind of turned me off a little bit, as opposed to season 1.
Yeah.
This is gonna be season 3.
Oh, definitely.
There is. They've already invested freaking tons of money into this series. They're projecting 5 seasons.
Yep.
I mean, I'm sure they'll get it, right? It's still at the end of the day, it's still Lord of the Rings.
It's Amazon Prime's big money maker right now in terms of Prime Video.
I was looking at reels and even on Reddit, some people are watching it. Millions of people are tuning in to this show. Like,
Yeah, I believe
even when it was, coming on a weekly, and even now since it ended weeks ago, people are still watching that shit. You still see the advertisements on when you go on Amazon Prime and you look that shit up. They're advertising the shit out of it, which is great. I support that 100%. But at the same time, I am a host of a podcast, and I am going to talk shit about it.
Yes.
That's how I feel.
Do you have any praises at all?
Yeah, there's cool things about it that we can talk about for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun nods, and there's a couple of just like moments that, like, you kind of have to just kind of smile and groan at because they're just so like incredibly cheesy. Like later on, we see what's his name has captured Galadriel, and they like sit down at like a
Anatar?
table. Anatar, yes.
No, not Anatar, Adar.
Adar, the other A antagonist. Right. But Adar has Galadriel sat down at a table, and it's like a table full spread, and he's trying to convince her to join up so that they can go like attack Sauron together, because Adar's like big thing is that he doesn't want the Uruks and the orcs to be slaves. Basically, he wants them to be free. Like they're still very evil and do horrendous things to everybody that aren't orcs, but he doesn't want them to be slaves.
Yeah.
So he has them sit down out of like this full nice spread, and you see like a close up of like turkeys and berries and stuff. And part of me is just like, he had to order like these big, like bulky, gross, like Uruk to go just like go find like a berry bush out in the wild and just pick berries. I don't know why that tickles me as much.
No, I
as
get
does.
it. I get it. It's
So your favorite part of the series was some orc picking berries? Is what
Well,
you're
it's like
telling
you
me?
never see it, but it's the implication, right? There's a lot of things that are implied.
$1 billion.
Yeah, like
yeah, no, there's some cool stuff. There's also some interesting stuff that I've always wondered about and perhaps read, but maybe forgotten about. But in the series, they do in fact show like a little infant orc.
yeah.
So I thought that was like, oh, okay,
Aw.
that's cute, but like not.
It's
actually
not something
cute.
that was ever kind of like
brought up.
the
Right.
fact that there are actually like female orcs.
I thought they just came from like the ground.
Well, they do.
They do.
And they don't. That's the thing. They're implied that they originally came from there. Like, that's how they're made through, like, the black magic or whatever. But then it's like, once they're created, they are able to sustain their population through their own means. But this is the first time that we ever actually see that.
But if you look into it, how Uruks are made, they're basically, tortured and mutilated elves, essentially.
Yes.
So that's how they came into being. And that's actually touched on a little bit by Christopher, what's-his-face, Saruman and the Two Towers. Or no, was that the Two Towers? Yeah, that was Two Towers. So that was a cool little nod, but I wish they kind of went a little further into that. But
The Uruk High aren't a thing yet. That was a Two Towers into, like, Lord of the Ring Fellowship and all of that.
right.
Those are your beefed up orcs.
Okay,
That's the best
So
movie.
let's take a step back.
All right, stepping back.
So the first episode, this is how it pretty much starts out. You see Sauron and Adar freaking talking to one another and arguing and whatnot, and a bunch of freaking orcs in the background, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're arguing. I can't remember what it's about, but just the way.
I was going to say what he was doing is Sauron is trying to get them to bow to him, get all of them to like pledge their loyalty and be his slaves, to like bow to him to be the new Dark Lord, and Adar was not having it.
Right. And so essentially Adar convinces the orcs to betray him, and they end up all, literally all of the orcs together stabbing Sauron. Right. And so they like take a bunch of swords, spears, and whatever, and he's literally just laying there on the ground, and they're all standing above him, stabbing him, like literally hundreds of freaking.
Jon Snow, got it. All right.
Right, but way more piercings.
Yeah.
Like Jon Snow wouldn't have survived.
Yes,
He would have been able to be brought back.
Yes, you could say that Sauron fell onto a knife something like 50 times.
Probably more than that.
Probably more than that, because they go at it for a minute.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think, does Adar give like the final blow, like to the heart, kind of like a Jon Snow vibe?
I think he gave the first one, actually. He stabs him with the crown.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
With the dark crown.
After all that ends, you see Sauron turn into this like black goop, essentially, like kind of like Venom from Spider-Man. You know, he turns into that like black goop.
Jon Snow turns into Venom. Got it. I'm following.
Yeah. So he turns into this black goop, and he freaking just goes down into the rocks, and then there's just this whole like montage of like the goop going into like crawling out of a cave, going through the mountains, going into the grasslands, and then it's out onto this like plain, and this woman is driving a wagon, wagon and horse, right? And it runs over the little black goop, and it attaches to the back wheel, and then it freaking just like crawls into the back of the wagon, and you just see the woman kind of like scream or whatever.
Yeah, you hear it. You don't see the process go down.
Right.
But
So you see it's clearly a woman, and then it shows it it attack her, and then all of a sudden you see Halbrand.
Yep.
And that's when he, meets some people, and then that whole next montage leads him out into the sea, where he then meets Galadriel.
Yep.
Which is from season 1, that whole scene.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see that, because like in the trailer, like they just show this like menacing black goop, and I'm like, okay, where are they going with this? This is interesting. But it turns out to just be a liquefied Sauron.
Sauron is one of the Maiar, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like one of the technically immortal, like wizard people.
He's in a way, sort of. He's a god.
Yeah, like he's like the same technical species that Gandalf is.
That they're kin-like.
They're kin-like. Fair enough.
That's the best way to describe it.
Okay.
Does Gandalf have a species?
Well, what I just said, it's
yeah. So they're. All that shit happens. If you need more explanation, freaking read the Silmarillion.
Or just deep dive on any wiki. You'll be there for hours.
And there's more to it, and it's a good read, also a hard read. But when Sauron is basically, thriving after Morgoth is defeated, so, Sauron becomes his successor, essentially. That's when the 5 wizards are sent down from the Maiar, whatever the fuck.
Outer space. They come down like comets.
Essentially.
And 2 of them just fuck off, right? So you got 2 of them that fuck off, and then you have 3 that
So there's
basically
there's Gandalf the Grey, there's Saruman the White, and there's Radagast the Brown, and there are two blue wizards.
Is he the dude with the rabbits?
Yeah,
Brown wizard, yes.
Radagast the Brown's the one with the freaking fast ass rabbits.
Yeah. We don't see him. Instead, we see Tom Bombadil.
Tom Bombadil, which
My boy.
I can say I'm excited for, because yes, we have always read about Tom Bombadil in the books. We have seen Tom Bombadil in an animated, movie and series, but we have not seen a live action.
Oh, I think the actor nailed it.
Oh
like,
no, I
just
enjoyed the shit out of it. I freaking was like, is that maybe?
Like everybody had their fingers crossed, and then like we see it's like old Tom. It's just like old Tom.
No, dude, no. The guy that played him is like, I forget what the actor's name. I think it's like Rory or something like that.
I'll look it up.
But no, that was one of the few scenes in the entire series that I enjoyed. His interaction between him and supposed Gandalf.
Supposed. So later on, we definitely find out what his name is.
Yeah, and that was a little bit of a buzzkill for me.
Yeah, Rory Kinnear. I'm probably mispronouncing the last name. Anyways.
Let's not butcher it. Rory something.
Yes, Rory K. But we like the subplot, like the kind of like forgotten subplot of this season is like
it's a dude from James Bond.
Mm-hmm.
Skyfall.
But the subplot of Gandalf and the Harfoots is definitely kind of put on the wayside. But then they just kind of drop like the big bomb of like, okay, Bombadil's here now.
Well, not only that, but then they freaking introduced this dark wizard dude who I'm kind of confused because there are only 5 wizards sent down, and he's kind of, I mean, he's obviously lying because I don't know where he's from. This has to be a writer thing because I've never even heard of this dark wizard dude.
I mean, it was already implied that Bombadil and the Dark Wizard were there before Gandalf ever landed.
Right. I understand that, but like,
so he's like the first wave.
So like
kind of stuff.
In lore, I've never heard of the Dark Wizard ever.
Yeah, because the Dark Wizard had always been Sauron.
But the guy that plays him, I think his name's like Kieran or something. But he's the king beyond the wall in Game of Thrones, Jake.
Yes.
But he has this, long dark beard, dark hair, and he has like this gray little streak of hair, and he's kind of playing both sides of like being an evil guy, but also like
it's like he's evil, so he wants to do away with the bigger evil that happens to be Sauron.
Yeah, so he wants to defeat Sauron, but become his successor. Essentially, that's what the Dark Wizard's kind of goal is. But yeah, this series, man, I'm telling you, it's interesting to a degree, but at the same time, but yeah. Anyway,
Visually, it looks really good.
Yeah. No, it's like the costume design is fine. Actor choices, I thought, were correct. Nothing is like overly exaggerated. There's one character that is clearly designed to make you hate him with every fiber of your being, that Kenan kid, the son of Pharazion. The one that's like constantly like...
Oh, yeah.
Like the Numenorian?
Numenor, yeah.
So he's the Joffrey of the show.
No, he's not that type. Well, maybe
he's
later
closer
on.
to that than you think. He's a shithead.
He is a little bit of a shithead for sure, but he's not killing puppies in his spare
yeah,
time.
big old evil.
No, but he's doing his damnedest to, like, trying to make himself important when his father is the one that's important.
Right. So that picture, that was Tom Bombadil. Insert Tom Bombadil here. But yeah, so we get to the part where the rings are essentially taken by Elrond because he feels like we're not in a good place to do this, blah, blah, blah. He has a bad feeling about it.
Yeah.
And he ends up taking the rings away from Galadriel and Gil-galad and freaking takes him to this shipwright. Ironically, to a guy who...
The oldest elf, apparently.
Well, he's like, okay, he's old and wise. He's going to see my way and how this is a bad idea, this, that, and the other. Well, turns out he's actually in favor, essentially, of, them having the rings. I'm pretty sure. And so the rings are end up given back, and so Galadriel has hers, Gil-galad has his, and then their third ring, that's going to be given to him. I forget what his name is. I think it's like Kieran or something like that. Let me look that up real quick.
Either way, so initially, because of all of this distrust, that, okay, they know that Sauron had made these rings, so he's on this big spree, Jake, that, okay, his influence is on these rings, and these are going to cause us to go down these paths. Well, when we go through and watch in the first season, we see that these rings are made from parts of the Silmarillion itself, and had very little interaction with Sauron and the creation of it. Like, the only thing that Sauron was like really there for was basically like the inspirational moment that Celebrimbor had with them.
Yeah, so he basically used him as as the forger, as a tool to create what we know as the rings, as the Lord of the Rings. And it's funny because Celebrimbor, R.I.P. by the way, ends up saying Lord of the Rings
on a couple occasions. But it is
particularly right when he freaking shanks him with the spear is what I'm talking about.
That was a rather healthy shank, because after Sauron is just casually shooting arrows into like his shoulders and his knees.
All right, so you remember how in Lord of the Rings, Sean Bean had the arrows 3 shot at him.
Yep.
Yeah. This dude Celebrimbor has 5. He has 2 in either thigh. He has 2...
One in each shoulder.
And he's not Sean Bean.
One in the arm and one in the shoulder, and then I guess the other one went like right here in his like chest a little bit, or maybe a little bit lower than that.
Yeah, towards his lung.
So like him and Anatar, a.k.a. Sauron, are basically like going at it, and he's like, you'll never freaking get what you want, blah, blah, blah. You'll never get the 9 rings. You'll never find them, that bullshit. And he just freaking picks up the spear, and he literally just, like, shanks him.
And picks him up.
Freaking picks him up against the wall. Mm-hmm. And then he kind of, like, wedges it to the ground. So he's literally up against the wall.
Yeah, he's propped up, like 8 feet off the ground.
In the air, up against the wall, and the spear is holding him up as it's wedged to the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty cool, but like honestly, that scene is just like a little. I don't know. It's a little dramatic.
It's dramatic. It comes off as like, okay, the show is being the show, so I'm not going to hate it. But it's just like the cheesy line of like, okay, these rings won't be your power; they'll be your prison instead. So it's like that last final jab, like the last final verbal jab before you get a spear impaled into your chest.
But I kind of want to touch a little bit on the 3 elven rings real quick.
Sure.
Just for informational purposes, really.
Yeah.
So obviously Gil-galad and Galadriel have one, and then the shipwright, Kieran, I guess.
Yeah, he has the blue one.
Right. So Gil-galad receives Vilya, which means air, which he later then gives to Elrond after he dies, which I'm pretty sure he dies in the Dead Marshes.
Yeah, he dies in that fight.
But you see that in the beginning of the Fellowship. And then Kieran, or whatever his name is, the shipwright, he has Narya, which is fire, which he then gives to Gandalf later
the red
on.
ring.
Later on, and then Galadriel, she has Ninya, which is water, and she later reveals that she has a ring to Frodo in the Fellowship of the Ring. Mm-hmm. But we don't really know that this elf dude, Kieran, or whatever his name is, you see Gandalf have a ring on, I think partly in the Fellowship, I believe. But they don't really touch on it at all, so I'm wondering if they're going to touch on that.
Yeah, they don't really bring up that bit with him.
At all.
I think they only bring up that it's like, okay, Gandalf has been around. Because even in terms of just like Hobbit years, like this guy was already older than Bilbo Baggins, and Bilbo Baggins was the oldest of them all.
Right.
So that's kind of the fun little play that we have there, is that all these ring bearers all have like extended life in some fashion or another. At least all the ones that don't have the 9.
Yeah, yeah. But we can, jump a little bit ahead, I guess, and we see that, was it the Mithril, I guess, where, if you have the moonlight out and it shows up a dwarven door, and in order to enter, you have to read that riddle, and the password is friend. Melon,
Yeah, what's Elvish for friend?
So they use Mithril, right, in order to, they discovered that.
Yeah, well, as kind of like an homage and like a partnership thing, they create basically a new entry, a new gateway, so that it would be easier for the Mithril to flow from the Khazad-dûm to Elvish City.
Right. Region,
thank you. So because of that, we see like the creation of the door that we see in the Fellowship.
So I thought that was a cool little homage.
Yeah.
You said. So I really enjoyed that. But then also, I forgot where I was going to take this. Oh yeah. So later on, you see Adar when they're fighting out of Region, and that city is basically destroyed 100%. He's fighting Elrond, and he ends up taking Galadriel's ring that she gave to Elrond for to protect, essentially, because she was taken captive before that battle over Region took place. But he ends up putting that ring on, and they end up meeting again later, and you see, Adar, he is clearly of Elvish descent, but he has like this scarring and
through the process of becoming Uruk.
Right. Essentially, he just looks kind of terrifying and whatever. But then once he puts that ring on, he starts turning back into an elf, and he looks clean and everything, and he looks like a handsome man. I'll be honest, but as soon as he takes that ring off, like they show his face with the camera, and it just slowly fades back into what he would look like.
What he was. Yeah.
So I was like, all right, that's kind of cool.
Yep.
But then that's when some shit goes down.
Mm-hmm.
So after Region's basically destroyed, Sauron kills Celebrimbor, and then Galadriel tries to, escape with some elves, and she ends up, getting captured again and is taken to Adar, and that's when he reveals that he has her ring, and we see that whole process. And so they end up just about to fight, but then that's when Adar and Sauron come into their little tidbit, and Adar ends up getting stabbed 1 billion freaking times by orcs because they decide to betray him because he, worked his magic, I guess, and said, hey, I got a better idea. Let's do it this way.
Yeah, Sauron basically silver-tongued the orcs that were following Adar. Basically, by saying it's like, okay, he's actually not, like, he's sending you to war. He doesn't have your best interests at heart. Well, the only reason why Adar is ever going to war is because he wants him and his people to just be free of any outside control. Mm-hmm. So we kind of see it come full circle, and we basically now see that Sauron has just gained control of the orcs.
Yeah, it's come for a circle, really, and those same orcs that stabbed Sauron 1 billion freaking times are now stabbing Adar 1 billion freaking times. So Adar's dead. There's no way of him coming back for sure.
Yep.
So now Sauron is the leader of the orcs, and now they are enslaved, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when Sauron and Galadriel have their little sword fight.
Yeah. Galadriel loses, by the way.
Yeah, she
very hard.
She gets stabbed.
She gets owned. Stabbed in the chest by the crown. Much like how Sauron got stabbed by it in the first episode.
Yeah. But let's backtrack a little bit. We're missing a really, really cool element. Let's talk about the dwarves. All right?
The dwarves.
Yeah. So, this whole thing where, what am I trying to say? The king of the dwarves, his name is
Durin the Third.
Durin the Third. Thank you. I was drawing a blank for a second. Shame on me. So King Durin is trying to lead his people into thriving, essentially, because they have now found Mithril, essentially.
Yes. Do you, Jake, to cut Colin off a little bit, do you want to guess what special power that the dwarven rings give to the dwarves?
They're taller.
No. So what it does, it allows them to see the different mineral deposits within the mountain. So they know exactly where the gold is. And good Lord, every good dwarf loves its gold.
Yeah, so when they say that a dwarf is greedy, that tracks.
Yes.
It's easy to be greedy when you know where the gold is.
Yeah, so
Well, exactly.
he's, having been given this gift, thanks to Celebrimbor and Sauron, there are 7 rings that were made. And, the 7 dwarf lords essentially get those, and, they're able to detect mineral deposits that basically make them rich, essentially. And so King Durin is able to find pinpoints of like, hey, let's make this. We find more gold, we find more silver. And then he is able to find a part in the mountain where you can mine mithril. While all this is going on, you can see the transformation that this ring is kind of taking over him mentally and driving him a little bit crazy and not himself, right? So his son, Durin, is picking up on this, and he's begging his father multiple times throughout several episodes, dude, take the ring off. You're not yourself.
Yeah.
Even his wife is able to try and convince him, but that ends up failing. He ends up killing his own people because the ring is making him do this crazy shit just to find some mineral deposits, essentially. Mm-hmm. And in this one particular instance, he's taking a particular tool and banging it against the wall and breaks through. And while that is happening, his son once again is asking him to take the fucking ring off, and you're not yourself, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
The wall collapses. They go into the little tunnel, and they see literally a cavern full of mithril.
Yes.
And it's just like, wow, it's freaking cool. We can get rich off of this and sell it, this, that, and the other, whatever you want to go with that.
Yeah.
So they kind of have a little bit of a somewhat of a heart-to-heart moment. And then right when the camera pans up on King Durin's face, you see this fiery light light up his face. A.k.a. a Balrog is in the depths of
the
this
Mithril
mountain.
mine. Yeah.
And you have woken him up by banging on these freaking cavern walls.
Yes. So there are different implications as well with this. They allude to in season 1 that the creation of mithril is involved with like different like holy magic or whatever, light magic, and that this mountain in particular has a lot of it because on top of the mountain, the holy wizard or whatever, wizard of light, whatever, was fighting the Balrog originally.
Right.
So you see that the mithril kind of goes down through the mountain in like kind of like a lightning bolt-esque like streak and pattern. And then that the Balrog is just like deep within the mountain. Well, it's implied that all of this streaks from this particular illustration ends up becoming the mithril.
Right.
But also that means that underneath all that mithril is the Balrog.
Right. So to give a little bit of of an explanation what mithril is. It's basically this mineral-like substance that's very, very, very durable. You can make chainmail out of it. You can, forge it into a very durable, like rings of power, and many other substances and objects, things like that. The chainmail that Bilbo had was made of mithril, so that was a kingly gift, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
That was given to him by what's his face. But anyway, yeah. So we see the Balrog, and he basically kills the king, essentially.
Yeah, but we get one last really fantastically delivered internal monologue, because throughout all of the dwarven subplot, it's during the fourth, trying to convince his father to, give up on the ring, go back to how he was, give up the ring and your promise of riches for the sake of your family. And during the third, finally kind of realizes that at the very end, you see him take the ring off and then charge into the Balrog to protect his son.
Yeah. He kind of just sets that off to the side and says, all right, I'm going to go take care of this. You're king now, essentially. And you just see it in slow motion. The Balrog has its fiery sword, and it's coming down like this. And, King Durin's coming at him with a freaking axe.
Just a regular ass battle axe, man.
Battle axe.
Just a man's man to the last.
That was a really cool scene when both the axe and the sword collide, and this flash, takes up the entire TV screen, and that's when all the rock and gravel collapse, and that tunnel is now
it closes
sealed.
off. Tunnel.
So that's the last time we see any of the dwarves until, I guess, this next season, and that's when we jump into the Battle of Region, which we kind of already talked about.
Yeah. Well, to actually you a little bit, the dwarves do come to the elves' aid at Region, but it ends up being kind of a bittersweet moment, because Elrond's asking, it's like, hey, where's my friend during the fourth? And he's just like, well, he's in mourning. And Elrond just kind of puts it together. It's like, okay, the king is dead.
Yeah. So that was an interesting little side plot for sure. I really much enjoyed. I knew the Balrog was going to come. I was kind of hoping it was later, I guess, maybe next season, but I guess now we'll have to suffice. But it was a cool little interaction, and then that's next time we see that very same Balrog, I guess, is in the Fellowship, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So that was really cool. But now let's jump over to the Southlands.
Sure. You want to talk about Numenor?
Southlands.
Or Southlands in particular?
We can flop back and forth. They're kind of one and the same.
They're the same storyline at this point, towards the end of season 2.
Yeah, so, Numenor basically... God, where do I even begin?
Well, we want to talk about basically the Queen and co. are coming back to Numenor after the failed battle at what is now Mordor. The Queen is very blind, and people are starting to become suspect of her ability to lead.
Yeah.
So one of her advisors,
Pharazôn,
sees this as a great moment to kind of instill unrest and make a play at the throne, so to speak.
Yeah.
So we go through this. I find it funny. The lowest rated episode for that entire season is episode 3, where it's almost entirely the politics bit of Numenor, where we have the eagle coming in.
The eagle comes in at the end, which is what's the word?
It's supposed to be in the old faith or whatever. It is that if the eagles come down and blesses your coronation, then you are the true ruler, or the rightful ruler of Numenor.
Which happens.
And
they're instilling that upon Pharazôn, right?
Yes. Well, it's weird because the eagle comes in, and then like
she's-
Pharazon's like just like he's like the closest one to it, and he's the one that like walks up to it first. Well, the queen's blind, so she has no idea like where it is, so she couldn't even like walk up to it if she wanted to.
It's up for interpretation if you want to look at it like Pharazon's the rightful ruler, or actually it is the queen, which we then find out later when they put both her and what's his face, Elendil's father, up for trial, and
Elendil is his name.
Elendil.
Yeah.
No, Isildur. Sorry,
Isildur.
Isildur's father.
Yeah.
Elendil. Right. They're the same.
Yes.
They're not.
They're
anyway, they're up for trial for treason and some bullshit, whatever that's conjured up. It's all bullshit, essentially.
Yeah. The weakest part of this is the politics in Numenor, because we get this little bastard like Pharazon's son, Kenan, who just fucking hates Isildur's family.
He is in a way Joffrey. He is in a way,
such
but
a
he doesn't.
petty
like I
asshole.
said earlier, he doesn't freaking kill puppies in his spare time. But
He probably would if you gave him a knife, but he's too much of a pansy.
He is a little bit of a pussy. He talks a mad game, but like if you went up against him in a fight, he'd get his ass whooped.
Yeah, he gets his ass whooped by one of the king's like loyal guards,
yeah.
and he gets his arm broken, and you just like for like half a frame, you see him just like crying in the corner.
Yeah.
Well, the moment that the guard takes up the full frame of the screen, he gets stabbed in the back by the guy.
Yeah.
And then that's when everybody in the room gets, accused of treason and arrested.
Arrested, right?
And then we get probably the only I thought it was the best redeeming part of the Numenor stuff is when the queen volunteers to take the trial. So Pharazon recognizes that the old faith is kind of still around, but he wants to crush it, right? So they kind of go to some old beliefs and old rules that, okay, if you think that you are not guilty, we'll put you to trial via sea worm. So they have this method of calling the sea creature that they just call the sea worm. And
is it a horn or a drum?
It's a horn.
Yeah.
But they call in this sea creature, and if it kills you, well, then you had to be guilty, right? Very witch trial kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's oh, well, if it doesn't kill you, then I guess you're innocent. So we see that the queen kind of volunteers, just okay, I'm responsible for the people under my control, and thus by old law, I am able to take the trial in their place. So she does. So she jumps into the water.
Oh, boy.
She sinks down low enough, and she ends up coming face to face with the sea worm. I really wanted to say that she sees it, but she's blind, so she can't. But then you just see the monster roars at her, screams at her, and she's just stone faced at it. And in the next scene, they're trying to say it's been a couple minutes. Okay, the queen hasn't resurfaced. She's
dead.
clearly guilty. The monster just throws her back up onto land, and then it's just and the queen is she plops onto land, innocent.
That's almost verbatim exactly how that fucking goes. And so they're all "Hail, Queen Muriel." That's her name.
Queen Muriel, Queen of the Sea.
Queen of the Sea, right. And so that's all fun and dandy. Meanwhile, over in the Southlands, we're going to jump a little back to season 1. So there's the whole battle and whatnot. And so this kid named Theo, dude, I have some theories about this kid, but at the same time, if it happens, I'm going to be really pissed. But we're going to get in that another time.
Yeah.
So this kid Theo and his mom, I forget what his mom is.
Doesn't matter. She's dead at the end of the season.
Yeah, so the next time that we see her, not really.
She's getting a ceremonial pyre.
Yeah, essentially. So somewhere between the end of season 1 and the beginning of season 2, she dies. We have no idea how she dies. I guess.
Well, we do actually. Her like elf lover person.
Yeah, I forget what his name is.
He basically says like human flesh is not so quick to forget orcish poison. Something to that effect.
So when she got stabbed in season 1, that
they
thought they healed her, but it
did not. So that's the bit that I think is kind of dumb writing, because it's just like, well, at the end of season 1, she's clearly just walking around like she's like fine enough to move.
Yeah.
And then they make a comment like, oh, well, we never fully healed her and now she's dead.
Yeah. Anyway, so he's kind of, this kid Theo, her son, is like, bearing all this weight that his mom died, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So he...
Standard childhood trauma stuff.
Yeah, whatever. It's kind of boring, and who the fuck cares? Everybody's parents die at some point. Get the fuck over it, kid. Whatever. God, that was a little brutal.
Moving on.
So like, there's kind of like this little bonding moment between him and Isildur, who ends up surviving from the volcano that erupted in season 1, thanks to his horse Beric.
Yes. The best boy.
Yeah, good boy, good horse.
Good horse.
What has exactly happened? The spiders, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah. So Beric comes in, saves them from the spiders, and they get out, whatever. He ends up making his way back to the Southlands part where they're all, building homes and whatnot. And all along the way, he meets this girl.
Yeah, one of the wild men.
Yeah. And so they kind of work it out together, and they end up falling in love, sort of, kind of. But she's actually betrothed to someone else. So it's kind of like this. What would you call it?
Love triangle.
Love triangle. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. So there's a love triangle between her, Isildur, and her betrothed. I don't even remember what his fucking name is. It's important. But he's basically like the leader of half the village, if you will.
Yes. The only reason why this ever becomes confusing is because she was like 90% certain that he had died, like her fiance or whatever. So then when she discovers like towards the end of the season, it's like, oh, you're actually alive. They have a moment, and then like we see it, like Isildur just kind of like think to himself off to the side.
Yeah, so that was kind of interesting, funny, and also like in the lore, he does have somebody. He does have a wife, but I actually think she dies, if I remember correctly. So I guess they didn't really want to go that route, the writers, and so they have this other girl playing his love interest instead. So that's interesting. Where do we go from there? Oh, we get to see an Ent.
Yes, we
get to see some fucking Ents. We get to see a male and a female Ent.
Yeah,
yes,
all right.
And the female Ent in particular is the one that's kind of like the boss of the group because she's the oldest tree, so she's the wisest tree.
Oh, man.
She's also the craziest and the most grumpy because she's really pissed that, people need firewood. Well, stop trying to murder all of my friends.
Yeah,
I like it.
So, like, there's this whole...
Like I said, best film.
So, to give context, there's these group of individuals that are loyal to Sauron, and so they end up getting these literal brands on the back of their neck, and then the people that are not loyal obviously don't have the brands. And so we end up finding out somewhere down the road. Meanwhile, all these people are being taken by these giant beasts or whatever, and you see like several yards of forest like demolished, and they're like, what monster is doing this? And it turns out to be ants. So ants killing trees.
Yeah, I don't really.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
Huh.
So like they literally show like a sky view with the camera of like these trees torn down, and it's because of ants. Did you notice that? I
thought it was implied that the orcs were the ones cutting the trees down and using them for their stuff, but I could be wrong. I'd have to go back and watch the scene.
Maybe, but they were looking for.
Yeah, because the ants were looking for the orcs in particular, because
maybe I misinterpreted that. That's
because the question that was presented to them and to the party that was dealing with the ants is, have you ever brandished an axe? And it's just flat out, it's like, have you ever used an axe for any purpose? Because an axe traditionally is used for lumber.
Right.
So they're just like, they're doing their best to be like, okay, well, yes, we have, but we do it, like Isildur is like explaining, it's like, well, we do it so that we can have shelter, so that we can, like, not grow cold, cook our food and all this. And they have an elf in the party, and the elf is like talking them down, be like, don't stop talking, let me talk to you, the tree people.
Yeah.
And he ends up
they end up coming to terms, and so they make their ways, because these ants were they were literally capturing.
They were capturing the people
and like putting them in like the tops of trees that they couldn't get out, as like a prison cell. And so that's what they're hunting for, is like, who's taking our people, and it turns out ants are doing it. So that's kind of funny. But they then come to this agreement like, yeah, we're not going to cut any more trees down, blah, blah, blah. And that's when Farazan's son comes ashore and freaking like, hey,
we need one.
I promised y'all aid, supplies and food and shit, but
we're actually going to turn your town into a military complex, so we need lumber for that.
So y'all are gonna cut down trees, and if y'all do that, we'll supply you aid.
Yeah, we'll supply you food for the winter.
So that's when Isildur, looks over at the people he's hanging out with, and he's like,
"This is going to end terribly." But I have to go back to Numenor, and he gets on the boat and heads back to Numenor
with Beric. And not his love interest.
Yes, no, the lowborn, as Keenan was calling them, had to stay behind.
But a horse is not lowborn.
Nope.
Yes.
Hell no.
That horse is kingly.
Yes. But speaking of kingly, so all the stuff in Numenor is going down. Farazan is in full control, full on going through the streets, removing the old guard and the any loyalists to the old crown, like taking them out into streets. And I don't think they start killing them. They just start like mass arresting them. But we then see the queen give arguably the second most important item in the entire franchise to Isildur's father. Elendil, yes. I keep forgetting his name too. But she passes off Narsil, the sword that is basically Excalibur. Whoever wields this sword is the king of mankind.
Yep.
And it's just like, we can rebuild, but we cannot lose this sword. Go, leave me behind.
Hey, Jake, you remember over text, and I texted the group that I had bought a sword?
Oh, are you going to have to... You're making the editor me work. Okay, you need to send me that photo later then.
Okay. So I bought a sword. No. It's a replica. It's the sword that I'm talking about, that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. That's the sword I bought. It comes with a mount, and it's about 5 feet tall. Just to brag or anything. But,
yes. So, Jake, the reason why this sword is so important is in the beginning of the Fellowship, this is the sword that cuts off Sauron's finger.
Hand.
or hand, whatever. Minor details. Hand,
That's a pretty big detail, baby.
well, I mean, he got what mattered. The ring is off the body,
I see where you're going with this.
but it cuts the ring off, and that's what starts everything, basically.
Little do they know.
Little do they know.
Yeah, so, Sauron, takes that sword and basically, puts it onto the ground and steps on it, and it breaks. And then that's when Isildur
Isildur uses, the hilt that still has, some
sharp pieces
on it and slashes at the hand.
The hand.
And that's what is also later reforged into the Flame of the West.
Anduril.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah. The show, overall, man, dude.
Seems like you liked it. I don't know.
There's a lot of...
No, there are parts, like I said, there are parts about the show that were cool and I respect and I loved.
There's just a lot of in-between that don't mesh well.
In-between shit, like Kenny's saying, like we said earlier, there needs to be a better way. There needs to be a better approach, for sure. So hopefully this next season that comes out, I guess next year, or they're going to wait 2 years. No, last season. Yeah, no, it'll be next year. There needs to be a better approach. They need to stop convoluting shit. They need to... See, for me, for a series like this that has so much lore and you have the opportunity to insert your own little plot twist, whatever, each individual episode's 65, 77 minutes, whatever the fuck long.
Yes.
For me, I would prefer a show to be shorter and have, something of substance, something of quality than just a bunch of...
This man out here wants 3-hour episodes
in one episode. I don't care. I want something of quality. I prefer quality over quantity. So if you're going to freaking drag it out and only... Yeah, this season was, 8 episodes, right?
8 episodes.
Right? Do 10 and actually make each episode of quality.
Yeah. Well, this one was interesting in particular because they released, the first 3 all at once?
First 3 at once.
And then they, did weekly drops of the later episodes.
Yeah, so that's 5 weeks, or 6 weeks, really.
Effectively only 6 weeks of the show being, fresh and new.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, I respect that, but at the same time, I prefer quality over quantity.
I miss the old Netflix ways.
Well, you just want them to drop it all at once?
Yep. I do. I really do. I understand the business aspect behind it. They want you to renew and all that, but...
So, okay, with that being said, thinking of in terms of, say, House of Dragon or Game of Thrones, would you want every single episode dropped all at once, or do you want to look forward to something every week?
Nope, rather just binge it.
I find that to be impossible to fully grasp the density of the topic that was covered in this particular example. Because I remember I binged Game of Thrones. I don't remember a damn bit of it.
You weren't,
because I did. But Colin, you're a special case because you watched every season 6 times before the last season ever came out.
I think 6 times is an understatement, but that's besides the point. Actually, that is the point.
That is the point.
No, that's something to look forward to every week, man. It's the little things, those things that you look forward to every single week, whether it's a TV show or a particular event with friends, family, that kind of thing. That's the type of guy I am. I want to look forward to something every week. But if I have a show dropped in one particular day, that's just going to ruin my entire week. I'm going to ignore all of you, and I would rather just watch that show. I'd rather be anti-social.
Sounds like a good week to me.
Honestly, that doesn't sound any different than what I'm doing now, but ideally, that's what I would prefer is, be more social.
Yeah.
I blame my job.
That's fair. Boy. But the last episode leaves us with a lot of different cliffhangers for the season coming up. we're going to have to deal with even more dwarven politics because Durin has a brother, and guess who's dead? Their dad. So now there's a fight for the throne.
You just can't get away from politics, can you?
Oh no, it's Middle Earth, man. It's all about the politics. You might think it's about like the rings of power or whatever. No, it's about the inner politics of like dwarven society. Anyways, we also see the stranger finds his staff through some counsel of old Tom Bombadil, and just kind of offhand, one of the, not the Harfoots, but the other group that they were staying with, the Stools, whatever they were called.
I think they were stools.
Stools. Like the desert mountainy variety of Harfoot. They just kind of casually call the stranger the Great Elf or the Grand Elf.
Dark Wizard.
The Dark Wizard.
Yeah. Well, and then the Dark Wizard comes in later. And
you're talking about Tom Bombadil.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
I'm talking about the stranger, right? They call the stranger the Great Elf, Grand Elf, whatever.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see where you're going.
And like this entire season and most of the first season is the stranger doesn't know who he is, like what's his purpose. He knows he can do magic and he's kind of afraid of it. Quite frankly, he should be. And he's just having this conversation with Tom Bombadil, and he's just like, they're going to call me Gandalf. And my brain is just like, Gandalf is just Great Elf, Grand Elf, but just like slurred together.
Yeah, so
that kind of broke my heart a little bit. It's just like, oh,
no, like before all that, he's telling him like, you'll find out your name, and when you know your name, it'll come to you.
Yeah.
Whether that's from a person or
that really
experience
from?
that you have.
That's what Tom Bombadil says.
But Gandalf really is just a...
Well, Gandalf comes up with Gandalf's own name.
Oh, so it's not like a...
But it's just the fact that he's called the Grand, whatever. It's
not a Hodor
Gan
situation.
Like, yeah.
Yeah,
It feels similar to that.
It
honestly.
does.
It's almost like George R.R. Martin stole his material from...
Tolkien's older, buddy. It's the
Like
other way
quite
around.
a margin.
He's been dead for some time now. No, so like Tom Bombadil's explaining, like, yeah, you'll know your name when it comes to you'll find her staff.
You'll eventually find the staff.
You'll eventually find her staff. You just have to be in the moment when it comes to you, whatever, blah blah blah, all this bullshit. And so he ends up finding out what his name. But before that, I guess he finds
his staff. Like the staff is just on the ground.
It's just a piece of wood, a log on the ground, and he's just like, "Hey, this looks like a staff."
Like he picks it up. It's like the correct size. Like even before he ever says his name is Gandalf, you see the staff, and it's the same staff.
Yeah.
That Gandalf uses in like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it's just like, okay. The writing was on the wall for a while, but this confirms it, kind of thing.
Yeah. So that whole, it's not great for Gandalf. Like the whole storyline for Gandalf, it's just not that well put together, in my opinion. But at the same time, I want to say that it is because it involves Tom Bombadil, and I freaking I can't get enough of it. I freaking love it. I'm obsessed with it. I freaking that's one of my favorite parts of the entire fucking show in this season is Tom Bombadil.
Tom Bombadil being just
cheeky asshole. I would honestly I would watch it like a reel, like a montage of all of the scenes that Tom Bombadil is in from this series. I would watch that for sure, because he puts out wise things,
like actual decent advice.
Yeah, like that typical Gandalf shit that you see in the Lord of the Rings that are on reels now today. We're gonna be seeing that from Tom Bombadil here in the near future, guarantee it.
Yeah, and it's just the last moment before they have their fun little kumbaya sing along moment.
Oh yeah.
Gandalf comes up to him, and it's just like, you meant to test me. To did I want to, like, embrace the power, try to find my staff, like, in this collection, because he just brings them to, like, this random group of, like, dead trees.
Yeah, it's like, hey,
it's just like, your staff is somewhere over there, probably. I don't know.
It's a
you'll know it when you find it.
It's a literal canyon of freaking dead trees. Like, go find your staff in this pile of dead wood.
Yes. And it's like, while all this is going on, he's been having, like, dreams, premonitions of, like, the Dark Wizard and Nori and
something
Poppy.
bad is going to happen, Poppy.
Yeah, them getting in danger, and he has to decide whether or not he wants to figure out who he is and realize, like, his, like, strength and potential, or go protect his friends. Mm-hmm. So naturally, because the show is like, okay, Gandalf makes the correct choice. He almost always does. He goes to save the hobbits, and in that process, he protects a good majority of them. A couple get hit by rocks because, of course, they do. And after he saves everybody, there's just the staff on the ground, and he picks it up, and he's just like, I think I found my staff. But this is a long-winded way of saying that he goes back to Tom Bombadil, and he's just like, you meant to test me. You wanted me to choose my friends. And then Bombadil just kind of smiles, and he's just like, the staff finds you. You don't find it. You don't, like, you know your name when you know your name, kind of thing. Like, it's given to you. You don't come up with it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that's the last time we ever see them.
Yeah,
for the rest of the season.
That's pretty much how the whole series ends. Kenny, do you have any predictions for season 3?
Well, we're going to see Durin's brother.
Yep.
We might see Numenor finally flood out. It might be too early.
Will there be Ents in season 3?
We will probably see the Ents because they have to go foresting now.
Yeah, that's true.
We're going to see some more action with the elves and more stuff with them doing the 3 rings and all of that.
And well, the 9.
I think the big kicker for this season coming up in 3 is that we're going to see Sauron picking his 9 to be,
to be fair, all right, this is a double-edged sword kind of. Well, not really. It's one-sided, I guess. So, like, the whole turnoff for me was, like, it seemed like for most of this season, they were just focusing on that main plot, that being, like, forging the 9, how are we going to create the 9, and then once the 9 were created, now they were taken, I want the 9 back, right?
Yeah.
That's essentially how it worked out.
But that only happened over a course of, like, an episode and a half, so...
But it seems so much longer than that, Kenny.
It should be.
It
probably should have been. But stylistic choice.
So, like, that aspect, I want to find out who the 9 are. But the way they went about forging and bitching about, I want the 9 back, blah, 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 give them back to me. Like, that whole attitude about it, that whole storyline about it just kind of turned me off. They should have taken a different approach, but they did what they did. So this next season, yes, I do agree. I think they should at least kind of like hint towards who the 9 could potentially be.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Like, I have my theories about it, but I kind of want to just...
I'm sure we could probably cheat. I have to imagine that somewhere in, like, the old lore that all of these people are named prior to them becoming the ring race.
I don't recall them ever. Like, I know that the Witch King of Angmar, he is of... I believe he's of Numenorian descent.
He's probably Farazan then.
But I could be wrong. So it could be Farazan, but at the same time, I don't know.
Farazan or his bitch of a son.
His bitch of a son or somebody. But then I also, like, I'm really excited. This has to be a much, much later season, probably season 4 or 5 or whatever. But, like, the the king that betrays Isildur, and then Isildur curses him, which we find out in like the Return of the King. They turn into ghosts, and then they come back and fulfill their oaths. I hope they dive into that at some point.
Well, that would be. So we were vaguely talking about this prior to you showing up, Jake. That my desired conclusion for this entire Ring of Power franchise is that we get the final moment of the ring coming off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So to do that, we have to jump like 20 years because Isildur is like 18, 19.
Yeah,
he said he needs to be like 36.
So before you showed up tonight, Jake, we were saying, that exact conversation is over these next couple seasons. You know, they're saying projected 5, but there might be potentially more. But if there's definitely going to have to be some time jumping here. So they can have some freaking like House of Dragon bullshit. Like one season is just like, you know, this characters as is, and then this next season that comes out, it's 10 years in the future and all the characters are different. That kind of vibe, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like something, there's definitely going to have to be a time jump. But back onto what you were just saying is I am looking forward to the very, very, very last episode of the entire series. And I kind of agree with you. Like I said before, there needs to be that jump into where we're into the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, where they're at the Dead Marshes having that giant battle for Middle-earth, and that's when Sauron gets defeated. So, like, my kind of take on it is, like, the series is going to end, like, right when they're going into battle, and then you can literally turn on the Fellowship, and that's when...
Yeah, it's like have like the big like kicker, the big cliffhanger. It's like you just see like Gollum like crawl onto screen or something.
Yeah. And so, speaking of Gollum, they're taking that, they're making a new movie.
I saw that. I don't know how I feel about that yet.
I don't know how I feel about it either, but Aragorn, or Viggo Mortensen, is on.
He's on board.
I think he's.
Is it casted properly?
He's my least favorite character. So, you guys like Gollum?
Oh, Gollum. Oh, I thought you were talking about Aragorn. I was like,
wait, what? I was like, that is a very hot take.
That's a very hot take.
Okay.
We're at the...
Like, you're fired. Get out. Oh,
Can you
boy.
fire a volunteer?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know.
But anyway, yeah. So I'm excited for this next season, but at the same time... I'm gonna be critical because this series means a lot to me. These books mean a lot to me. So that's where I stand. I have high hopes, but at the same time, if they disappoint, I'll definitely let you all know. Hence why we do this podcast.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe between now and then we can actually sit Jake down and have him watch this stuff so we can have an opinion.
I just feel like this hasn't had the oomph yet, and I feel like that's kind of disappointing. I don't know. Do you guys disagree with that?
The oomph?
Well,
with it being Lord of the Rings, I think this was Amazon's attempt to be Netflix's Stranger Things or HBO's Game of Thrones. Or does that make sense? Or
no,
Disney's
I get you.
Star Wars.
It does live in that era where it has to work up to its own legacy of we have to produce something of similar quality to the original trilogy. Otherwise, fans are going to hate it.
Yeah.
But then we also live in a world where The Hobbit came out, and that was that 4 movies, or was that just the 3? 3. Okay. And that trilogy and how people interacted with that. So
I feel like
where do you go?
I feel like they made a really good decision with Lord of the Rings. Like if they were kind of trying to find something to compete with Star Wars, I think they picked a good one.
Sure.
But I just still haven't felt like I want to keep saying oomph. Like it's just not. I don't know.
It hasn't impressed you yet.
Yeah, and well, it's not just me. Like I just feel like out in society, and I don't know. Maybe you guys disagree, but
I hear you. I don't disagree, but here's my perspective.
Like when Game of Thrones is going on, like everybody was talking about it.
All right, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I kind of want to I don't know, mold it into what I want to say, so just bear with me. So this is kind of my take. I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm a Game of Thrones fan. Whatever kind of, shows, movies, whatever they put out, I'm going to watch. Now, obviously, there are going to be shows and or movies that are going to be better than the others, right? So that's a given. So the original trilogy are by far better than the Hobbit series or even this new Amazon series, Rings of Power. And the same thing with freaking Star Wars. The original 3 are by far better than the prequels or the fucking bullshit with Daisy Ridler or whatever the fuck her name is. I don't even remember. Like with Game of Thrones, obviously the beginning is great and then it freaking sucks, right? You're just freaking left disappointed and things like that. So I'm a fan of this whole sci-fi fantasy world. I'm going to watch it, but I'm obviously going to have favoritism towards, the earlier stuff.
Yeah. The nostalgic glasses are rose tinted.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, so that's kind of my take. Like, if you're a fan of the series or a fan of the universe, if you will, watch the shit and then obviously form your own opinion as you go. But, like, if you're not going to watch it and you're just going to form an opinion just based off of what you read on the internet, then you and I have a problem.
No, fair enough. No, and I agree with you, right? So I agree 100% with you. I still feel like it hasn't been as, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it hasn't popped in culture and society as much.
It's not on your forethought. It's not a part of the zeitgeist, so to speak.
Yep, exactly. Zeitgeist is a perfect word for it. And I think there's a lot of examples of it. Like, I feel like Stranger Things changed stuff. You could tell, like, it was just very prevalent in culture and people are watching it. It's kind of like Tiger King
the earlier stuff, if you're talking about Stranger Things, the earlier stuff, like the first 2 seasons.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, we're 2 seasons of this, right? So,
right.
And I just feel like it's not even. I'd be curious if you were to rank, like, where this all falls compared to some of the more popular Star Wars shows or Game of Thrones or pick your poison, Harry Potter or whatever. And I feel like it. I don't want to say it's a flop because I think there are a lot of diehard fans that really enjoyed the books and all that. Like, I have a ton of respect for that. And I get it, but I just, in terms of zeitgeist, like, I just don't think, and it may just be like a paywall barrier too. Like, not everyone has the Amazon, but
yeah,
I don't know. Just curious.
Well, stop being fucking cheap and get Amazon.
That's my initial thought.
Freaking, sub it out for Disney Plus 1 month and get Amazon instead. And then the next month, when you're like, oh, I actually am very disappointed in this series, I'm going to go back to Disney Plus. So cancel Amazon and get Disney Plus again. Yeah. It's not that hard. They literally are the same fucking price.
I know. I get it.
Yep. All right. Closing thoughts, gentlemen. We've gone over our predictions. We've gone over our feelings and whatnot. Is there anything that we have left unsaid?
Do better.
Fantastic, constructive criticism. Just do better. All right, Colin, where can the people find us?
That was perfect. See you, mate.
Bye. Point us out.
Yeah, y'all can find us if you enjoyed this. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that subscribe button. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, anywhere. You can find us on any media platform. Not any media platform, but the basic media platforms for
just
podcasts.
About wherever you'd find your podcast streaming services.
But please hit that subscribe button. Hit that follow button, hit that like button. If you have any suggestions on episodes we should cover or any series we should cover, hit us in the DMs, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Other than that, thank you all for joining us. We love you. We support you and what you do. Have a good night. Don't do anything we wouldn't do.
Or do, have fun.
Cheers.
Bye.